All right, welcome back. We are COMP1050, and it's week 5, part 1. And we're talking about our project number 1, which is a top-down adventure game that you're going to make. It's due week 8, all right, which means it's just after the break. I was going to make it for week 7. It's your first solo assignment that you're going to do. It's worth 30% of your final mark. So it's pretty heavy duty, right? I'm still poking out the details, right? The total, I'm almost finished doing it. I've been working on it for the last couple of days. Basically, it's like this. Using your accumulated knowledge of ActionScript and Adobe Flash, CS6, create a simple adventure game using a top-down, bird's-eye view perspective and obscured by a fog of war, okay? So there's a fog of war that's a filter that kind of comes across, so it doesn't allow your player to see the entire game screen. Okay, pretty simple. Your game should include a scoring system, player health, random obstacles, and a timer to provide a reasonable challenge to the player. Okay, so I'm not saying enemies yet, okay? Because again, we have to work on those things, those concepts for ActionScript. However, if you've done intro to graphics, you pretty much know what I'm asking for, right? It's one level, okay? I don't want multiple levels. It's one level. It's a solo assignment, so you're not to share this with anybody else, okay? And you have an example of it that comes right out of Flash, right, that I don't expect you to use. But if you want to go to it, if you go to, on your Flash platform, if you go to More, and you go to Simple Files, like I showed you before, and if you go to RPG Game Collisions, it kind of gives you an idea of how it looks, what this game world looks like. Now, your game world is going to be vastly different than this one. This is just some idea and a little bit of code to get you going. Okay, it doesn't mean that you're going to use this design. I don't want that. I want you to make your own design, your own unique game. That's not looking like this. If I get this back, it's bad because this is already pre-written for you. Okay, I haven't mentioned a couple things too. I haven't mentioned classes or anything like that. That may be part of my requirements. I'm still going through them in terms of game structure, file structure, all that kind of stuff. We'll see how things go. I will update that, like I said, probably tonight. You'll have it up on the web, on Blackboard. But basically, if you look at this simple file that's included within Flash itself, it has already some code to give you some idea of how to do things like move up, move down, move left and right. I'm asking for 8 directional movement, all right, in my game. We'll talk about that in a bit. But when you play this game, and if I go back down here, there's not really much of a game right now. But if I actually launch it, it actually gives me the ability to move around. It gives me the fog of war, the idea of the fog of war, right? Which is really like a mask. It's just a filter that allows you, the player, to that carries with them. It could be like this. You can make it like this, or you can make it so that way the more of the world the player explores, the more he sees. That's a more challenging way of doing it, okay? And I'll give you bonus marks for that. If you just do this, this is okay, okay? I'm hoping that you're not going to make it so that the game world is 320 by 480. Make it a little larger. Make it, a larger game world. So I'm not asking you to make it in a 320 by 480 perspective. However, the top-down perspective is important, okay? When I say top-down perspective, I'm just going to launch out of here for a second. And if we go back to our Wikipedia definition, this would be more of a top-down perspective kind of idea. All right, top-down perspective, also known as bird's eye view, overworld, overhead view, helicopter view, one of those kind of views. That's the kind of game world I want you to make. It could be a tank game where all you can see is part of the game world. It could be an adventure game. I say adventure game, but I just really mean top-down game, right? I'm going to give you a lot of freedom here to hang yourself. I mean, to be creative, right? And do whatever you want to do, right? You can make it in any genre you like, all right? If you like Mario, or if you like Zelda, or if you like one of those characters, I'm not going to penalize you for using something that's, that's already done. We're not going to sell this game. This is purely for educational purposes. So again, you can use whatever graphics you like, right? We'll talk about that in a bit. But I want it to be this top-down design, and we'll talk about some more details in a sec. So I kind of put this in here so you understand. I'm going to put a couple more example screens in here to kind of give an idea of what I'm looking for. Again, the marks, I'm working on the marks, but I want you to have a game start screen. So how do we do a game start screen? We're going to talk about that, but basically, if you think about it, if your world is 640 by 480, literally you can make a screen that's 640 by 480 that has all the graphics and everything else. We just talked about animation over this last 4 weeks, how to animate stuff. So what's stopping you from making almost like an animated game screen that comes on board and makes sounds and all that kind of stuff? And then when you're done, you shift into your game world. And then when you're done, you shift into your game end screen. Okay, so there's 3 different screens, but nowadays with Flash, it makes it nice and easy. You can actually compartmentalize these 3 kind of screens. In fact, your game screen could be a movie of its own. So you've got your own movie, one movie for your game start screen. You got another movie for your game end screen, and then your main movie, the game movie itself, the game state, is going to be the screen in the middle, right? Which again, we've talked about before in Intro to Graphics. We talked about how to move from one state to another state. Okay? If we go back to that. Player movement. Oh yeah, your game, sorry, let's go to your game start screen. Your game start screen should have a simple soundtrack. Okay, so we're going to talk about sounds. But I want you to explore a simple soundtrack that's going to play and some game relevant graphics. Okay, so if it's going to be a Zelda-based game, you can make some graphics that make sense with the game. It's not going to be a black screen, okay? I don't want a black screen that says start the game, okay? It needs to have something in there. Some basic instructions of play. Remember Mail Pilot? We had from Intro to Graphics, we had some simple instructions. Here's how you play the game. Move with your arrow keys or whatever. A simple instruction screen. That's it. That's all I'm looking for. And it should be on the main game screen, okay? A button to start the game, a button to quit the game. So you can start the game or quit the game from the main start screen, or the game start screen. Your player movement and game perspective, like I said, it's going to be this top-down view, right? The fog of war should prevent the player from seeing the entire game world at once. Only a small portion should be visible or be revealed at one time. I'm going to say just be visible, be revealed. I might put that as a bonus. If you can, like, as you walk, you see more. As you walk, you see more. More. That's a little bit more complex and takes a lot more work to do. You only have 4 weeks or so to do it, and I don't want you to spend too much time trying to figure out the fog of war. Again, marking. I'm going to assign marks appropriately for difficulty. Fog of war is a difficult thing to do. I mean, if you haven't done it before, it can be challenging. I'm going to assign some marks onto there, but I'm also going to give you opportunities to compensate if you can't really knock it off. A player should be able to move in 8 directions using keyboard controls. What if? I know I'm going to get questions like this. What if you say, well, can I use my mouse, Tom? Well, yeah, you can, right? But the challenge is you still got to present the player with the same difficulties. He's still going to have the fog of war. He's still going to have his challenges moving around. So, and keyboard's a little easier. But what about this 8-directional stuff? Well, to me, it's okay if the player moves with the arrow keys, and if you want to move in a diagonal fashion, pressing both keys at once moves you in a diagonal. That's okay. He should be able to do that if you press both keys at once, or if you wanted to use, example, the mouse to point him where he's going, as an example, and then use some kind of forward or backward motion. I'm going to allow these scenarios. So I want 8-directional movement. She should not be able to cross or move across or through randomly generated or predetermined, I put in there as well. So if you made a predetermined game level, that's okay. If you want to make it randomly generated, that's okay. But there are going to be obstacles or barriers to move around or through, okay? So if it's, for example, a lake, and you're moving through a lake, he can move through it, but maybe he's going to get hurt, right? As an example, we'll talk about that. Or maybe the lake will just stop him altogether. It's your game world. You design it how you like, right? If it's a wall, some kind of wall or a tree or something else that's going to prevent him from moving forward, you've got to determine that. Okay. The player should not be able to leave the game window. So I don't want you to do a wraparound kind of game where it's a never-ending world, right? It's just one level. He can't leave the game screen. He's limited to finding his stuff, all right? The player's walk cycle should be animated, okay? So that what I mean is a few frames. It doesn't have to be a complicated 30-frame walk cycle. Okay, we're talking about very simple graphics here, right? Where he walks, he might have like his arms swinging, he might have his head moving. If he turns left or right, he's going to look differently. You can download some of these graphics from like Reiner's tile sets. It doesn't matter to me. All right, I'm not asking you to create new graphics. You're not graphic artists. You're not artists. You're programmers. So I don't expect those, for you to generate those on your own. Include simple sounds for your players' movements, collisions, power-ups, etc. that are relevant to your game. Okay, simple sounds like blip, or you fire. If there's no firing, I haven't asked you for firing a weapon. I haven't asked you for making AI. None of that. All I want you to do is make a basic, one level, find your treasures kind of game. All right. Scoring system and player health. The player should have health and a scoring system. So the scoring system is going to award the player for any quote-unquote treasure, power-ups. I mean, it's a very generic term. Whatever you find. If you're making a tank game, maybe it's fuel. I don't know how you want to do it. Fuel for health, and if you run out of fuel, then you die, right? It doesn't have to be necessarily health. You can have more than one of these things to make it more challenging. But remember, the more complex to make it, the longer it's going to take for you to generate this thing. The player's health should degrade slowly over time. In other words, maybe he or she is hungry or hurt, or maybe you're using fuel all the time. Something that's going on. That's why I made it degrade, right? The player can gain health by picking up a health power-up, or maybe a fuel can. I'm just giving you an example, right? Or lose health by passing over dangerous terrain or colliding with obstacles or enemies. And what I mean by that is, I'm kind of left it generic. So if you make an enemy and he just stands there and you run into him, so be it. Or if the enemy is coming in a straight line, like I'm not asking you for any AI at all here, okay? It's simple obstacle avoidance, if you will, okay? The obstacles don't even have to move, okay? They just have to be that simple. The game countdown timer. So the game is going to be limited by the countdown timer. So you have a fixed amount of time to pick up all the treasure in the game world, right? The game ends when the timer expires, or when all the treasures are picked up, and I'd probably say, or when your health is 0, right? That's the other thing. So I'll put that in there. When the treasure picks up, or when your health goes to 0. When your health goes to 0. And I'll talk about that in more detail later. The timer can be extended if the player picks up a timer power-up. Right? So if you pick up a timer power-up, you can get a few extra seconds or whatever. So I need you to make it in terms of seconds. It doesn't have to be. I don't want you to give the guy an hour to play his game. Okay? It's going to have one level. Maybe you're going to have X number of obstacles or X number of power-ups. It's got to be like, I don't know, 90 seconds to do the level. Right? So think about this as almost like as a first level of an adventure game you're building, that you're probably going to be able to add other levels to at some point if you want. Okay? A game end screen. The game end screen is going to display the user's final score and other game relevant information. Example, game over, you failed, you're an idiot, whatever you want to say to the guy at the end if it matches your game theme, right? Please keep it above board though if you can, right? Your game end screen should also include a simple soundtrack. It could be the same soundtrack as the game start screen, but it should be a soundtrack again, right? Mind you, did you notice I didn't say your game level should include a soundtrack. I haven't asked for that. And there's some complexities around doing a game soundtrack plus other sounds at the same time. And we're going to work through that. That's why I haven't asked for it for this time around. It should also include a play again button and a quit game button. Okay, so you should be able to do those things. Quit the game or play again, right? Of course, I'm going to ask for internal documentation, right? Throughout your code, I want you to document your code as normal, and an external document with a company logo, table of contents, version history, blah blah blah. I'm not asking for GitHub for this game. I'm not asking again. The second time, I'm not asking for it because it's just for you. Can you grab the door? It's just for you, and there's enough marks spread out for these 30%. This is worth, again, 30% of your final mark. So it's a major project. It's your own project. It's simple, all right? It's not that complex. There's a lot of code that you already have, right? If you want to use external code, like say, for example, you don't know how to do something that I've asked you to do, and I haven't explained it by game time, by the time it's due, it's okay for you to look at the net and see how to do it, as long as you credit the location you're looking at. However, I don't want it to take up more than 10% of your code, All right. So if you're really looking a lot, you have like a lot of trouble looking all over the place to find ways of making your game, patching your game up to work. We got issues. That means either I'm not giving you enough information, or you haven't done your legwork, right? So please run it through me if it's going to be more than 10%. I need to know, right? I need to know actually anytime you use external code, because it can't be a copy of somebody else's game. I will not allow that. Okay, and you can't just take someone else's game, copy it in ActionScript, and throw it into your Flash player and send it over to me and say it's mine. Don't do that, please. That's just not right. Right. So please, this should be something of your own, because we're going to build on this thing. Okay. Optional game features, and I'm going to add more. Your game includes moving enemies that provide additional challenge to the player. It's a game option. Right. I'm not going to make it a mandatory thing. Right. So if it's moving enemies, mind you, again, if you notice, I didn't say AI. I just said moving enemies. It could just be like a guy moving back and forth. Right. That's all it could be. Right. If your game includes enemies and obstacles that fire bullets or bombs at the player, right? So maybe he moves back and forth and fires a bullet in one direction all the time, right? That's okay, right? Your game allows the player to shoot bullets or blow up obstacles. That's okay too, right? Just don't allow the player to blow up the entire game world, because then it's kind of easy. You blow up everything. Who cares about the fog of war? And you just keep walking. That's not cool. So the fog of war is there to add complexity, and the obstacles are there to stop him and slow him down. And it's the game's on a timer, the level's on a timer for him, to stop him from getting all the treasure before the timer expires. Okay, that's the whole idea. Otherwise, I mean, we can make it as complex or as simple as you like. External document should be a Word document or PDF, right? And it says Python. It's going to obviously be ActionScript. I'm just using up that ActionScript in Flash. Flash CS6 project files, and please include all versions of your ActionScript code. And what I mean by that is, if you're going to have more than one version, like if you go version 1, version 2, version 3, I know I'm not talking a lot about versioning here, because I've taken that whole versioning section out. I still want to see some versions of your code. Like I want to see how you build up this particular code. So keep your version. So if it's version 1, let's say for example, your first bit of code is player moving, version 1, as an example. Whatever, that's part of your code. Keep it and put it into almost like a code archive of your own. And say this is my code history. This is how I did to build these classes up to make my code. It also gives me a little bit more context, as to your thinking, how you're thinking about things. I mean, again, it's not like we haven't worked together before, guys. So I know, you're going to have there's some complexity involved in making games. In fact, like I said to you before, if you can make games, you can do interfaces on any, language. If you think about it, right? Games are the highest level of interface design for player interaction. Okay, any questions before I sign off from this? Again, I'm going to have the details and the mark spread probably by tonight, and I'll load it up with some examples of what I mean, kind of up on Blackboard by this evening. Any questions? So lots of flexibility here, all right? I don't intend for this to be, an assignment where you're going to make the same game that's included in the Flash, in Flash Player, right? Flash environment. It's supposed to be for you to be creative, right? And again, simple enough. And if you're systematic in building your game world, it's not something that's undoable in a few weeks. Okay, so it's one level on a timer. We're going to talk about timers a little bit today. We're going to talk about some game elements today, and we're going to continue to talk over the next few weeks about how to create this stuff. Okay, if you want to use a framework, I told you before, we're going to be using the Starling framework later on in this course, right? Because it gives us additional tools and classes that layer on top of ActionScript to give us more functionality. That's okay. If you want to move ahead and use Starling, I'm all good with that, right? Because it becomes embedded in your file anyway. If you want to use classes, I haven't mentioned classes, but if you want to use classes as opposed to ActionScript that's embedded in your Flash file, that's okay too. And I think that I would prefer that, but I'm not going to force you to do that, because sometimes for the beginning ActionScript programmer, it becomes very challenging for them to use classes at the same time trying to manage the timeline. They don't know how to do things. And I don't want to add too much complexity to your work, right? Other than that, we'll be talking about this project number 1 over the next several weeks. So we'll go over it more and more as we go forward.